A major severe weather event is about to unfold across the United States, and this will bring an elongated risk of severe weather, which begins today and rolls through the end of this week, with significant damaging winds, very large hail, and several tornadoes being possible. So in today's forecast, we are going to break down exactly what you need to know about the weather that'll be impacting the United States over the next 7 days, and we'll begin with what's happening across the country today. And we are coming off of a very intense severe weather event that just happened back over in central and western Nebraska last night. We had multiple wedge tornadoes last night on our live stream on this channel. You can go check that out if you go to our channel. It was a crazy tornado event that we had back over in western Nebraska, just out of a couple of different discrete supercells, and we could see a similar threat evolve today back over in the Midwest as this low pressure system ejects over the Rocky Mountains and brings another potential for a regional severe weather outbreak. Additionally, back along the East Coast, things are very quiet for right now. Same thing with the Southern Plains, but I do think that will be changing as we go later into this week. Now let's talk more about the severe weather potential over the next few days, and we'll begin with today's risk. And we have a potentially significant threat of severe weather on our hands this afternoon and evening across parts of the Midwest, where the Storm Prediction Center has a level 4 out of 5 moderate risk of severe weather in place, or parts of Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, where significant severe weather does appear likely today. And then our level 3 out of 5 enhanced risk of severe weather is where there is a slightly more conditional risk for all hazards of severe weather, including pretty much the entire state of Iowa, northwest Missouri, back up into central Minnesota, and almost all of Wisconsin being in that level 3 out of 5 enhanced risk, and then a slight risk of severe weather that goes all the way back through Texas and all the way as far north as northern Minnesota. So our main concerns for today will be damaging winds and very large hail. To begin with, our highest wind threat for this afternoon and evening will be near the Twin Cities, back over into central and northern Wisconsin, where I do expect at least some scattered to numerous damaging winds between 60 to 80 miles per hour. So make sure you're protecting any sort of loose line items and hatching down trampolines. Our hail threat is a lot more significant, especially if we get any supercells that do fire off. And when we talk about supercells, we're talking about storms that are on their own, not like a line of thunderstorms. We're talking about individual storms on the map. So I do think that we are going to be talking about at least some giant hail later today, as high as the size of softballs, anywhere from around Texas back through Oklahoma and also back through the Midwest. So make sure you're protecting your vehicle if you can. I do think our large to very large hail threat will really be the highest out of our initial supercells, which should be sometime between about 2 to 6 o'clock, but there could also be some storms that fire off later, especially if you're back over from Kansas all the way through Texas. Our tornado risk is what is driving our moderate risk of severe weather today. Our highest threat of strong to long track tornadoes is going to be located in northern and northeastern Iowa, southeastern Minnesota, including areas like the Twin Cities, and also back into western Wisconsin, where strong to long track tornadoes are possible. We have a more conditional risk of strong and long track tornadoes if you're in the 10% hatched area, where we may or may not see a couple of discrete supercells fire off later this afternoon. Nonetheless, make sure that you are prepared for the potential for tornadoes, as if any storm does fire in this environment today, it will definitely be rotating and it'll be highly favorable for tornadoes as long as it can mature. And then further down to the south, there's also a potential for a few tornadoes, mainly around and just after sunset from around Kansas City back into North Texas. So make sure that you have multiple ways to receive alerts and have a tornado action plan ready to go. We will likely be live for most of today covering this severe weather event, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel and click the bell icon so you're notified when we do go live. And then as we go into Tuesday, our risk of severe weather will shift to the south and east, where we are almost guaranteed to see a lot more storms than what we're going to see today, but it is not nearly as significant of a risk of severe weather. The Storm Prediction Center has outlined an enhanced risk of severe weather for parts of Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York, where significant damaging winds, large to very large hail, and a couple of tornadoes will be a possibility. And then our slight risk of severe weather goes from New England all the way back over into Texas and Oklahoma. So it's going to be a pretty interesting setup on Tuesday, because a low pressure system will be moving over the Great Lakes. That's what's going to bring severe weather today to the Midwest, but also another low pressure system is going to form back over in the Southern Plains, which is going to help to create a potential for severe weather in Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, and also back into Texas. So our main concerns for Tuesday will be significant damaging winds, especially if you're back over around the Lake Erie area. Large to very large hail is also a possibility, and you don't see this very often, but we do have a significant risk of hail outlined by the Storm Prediction Center in Ohio and Pennsylvania, meaning we could see some hailstones as large as the size of baseballs tomorrow. So definitely a significant risk there. And then back over in the Southern Plains, a not so rare significant threat of hail will exist coast with hailstones as large as the size of apples being possible on Tuesday. Our tornado risk is actually not as high as you would probably think for this being such a large area, but we do have two areas to watch for. A couple tornadoes possible back over in the northeast, and then also a couple of tornadoes possible back over in Oklahoma and Texas. But I honestly would not be surprised if we actually end up getting a larger 2% tornado risk that kind of connected the two areas together, because I honestly think we'll actually see a couple of tornadoes being possible, even back over in Kentucky, or maybe even over into northern Tennessee or southern Indiana, and perhaps even a couple back over in southern Missouri. I honestly think across the board, this threat could actually get upgraded a little bit, but generally speaking, I think the tornado risk for everybody is going to be on the very low to low side of things. I don't think we're talking about a strong or long track tornado threat on Tuesday, at least for now. That could change though for the southern plains, depending on how that trough evolves as we go into late Tuesday and early Wednesday. So our tornado risk for today will be very elevated, especially if we get storms that fire off. And one of the main reasons why is because we have such a strong low-level jet, a lot of wind shear, a lot of instability, and the dew points are going to be very high. It's just going to come down to a matter of if storms do fire up in this environment, which there will be some storms today, don't get me wrong, but we are talking about the potential for discrete supercells to fire up in parts of Iowa near that boundary. And if any storms can fire up near that boundary, they will be able to produce the threat for long and strong tornadoes here across areas like Iowa, Minnesota, and also back through Wisconsin and northwestern Illinois. This is what it looks like right around 5-6 o'clock, and our significant tornado parameter values are basically almost maxed out here across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa, right where that moderate risk of severe weather is in place. So generally speaking, if any storms are in this environment, they will have the capability of producing tornadoes, which will almost undoubtedly be strong if they do form. Eventually, by the evening hours, our tornado threat will continue. We do have a favorable environment for tornadoes, even back over into Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Missouri, but it's a much more conditional risk for tornadoes in this region. Main reason why is because we don't exactly know if storms are even going to fire up in this area, and the odds of them firing up in this area are going to be lower than areas like the Midwest, for example, for today. Eventually, by the late evening hours, we still will have a fairly favorable environment for tornadoes, but I think by the time we get closer to midnight tonight, I don't think we're really going to be talking about any sort of discrete supercells still being out there. By this point, it'll be a line of storms probably weakening as it approaches the Great Lakes, and then further down to the south, there could still be an isolated tornado threat ongoing, but generally, I think the threat is much lower around and just after midnight tonight. So here's the timing for severe weather today. We already have some showers and thunderstorms out there this morning, but this is elevated convection with isolated damaging winds and hail being possible. This is really not the main event. Just after lunchtime today, we will begin to see at least some storm initiation happening back over in Minnesota, with damaging winds and hail being the main concerns initially, and then eventually by around 3 to 4 o'clock, a line of thunderstorms will start to approach areas like the Twin Cities. And again, this is the region where it's much more conditional, where we could see a discrete supercell or two. And in just a moment, I'm going to show you a different scenario that does show initiation and just give you an idea of what the difference could be today. And again, I honestly think today could either be really big or it could be a really low end day. It's just going to depend on if storms initiate this afternoon. Back over in Minnesota, though, this area of storm activity does catch my attention here, back over near the Twin Cities and even into northern Iowa. Even if we don't see discrete supercells fire off further down to the south, I honestly think these storms could still produce the potential for strong tornadoes this afternoon, given that they are likely going to be semi-discrete, if not linear, and this should still be a favorable environment because the wind shear is still going to be very strong up here, in addition to the dew point still being relatively high. So right around 4, 5, 6 o'clock, definitely be on alert if you're back over near the Twin Cities or over near Owatonna, and then eventually by around 7 to 8 o'clock, that area of storm activity moves into Wisconsin, where damaging winds and a few tornadoes will continue to be possible. Notice how the HRRR does not show anything really initiating here in Iowa, northern Illinois, or southern Wisconsin. Again, that is a possibility today. We might not see anything fire here, but if a storm does fire, which is again entirely possible, we easily will see all hazards of severe weather out of a storm like that. And then by Tuesday morning, things are clearing out. So here's a different scenario. This one does show a lot more initiation. This is during the morning hours. Again, pretty much the same story. As we go into the early to mid-afternoon hours, it doesn't really even show that many storms back over near the Twin Cities. But look at this. We got all sorts of little discrete supercells firing off back over here in eastern Iowa, southern Wisconsin, and northern Illinois. And again, I'm not saying this is going to happen. I think the odds of seeing something like this are a bit lower, but I do think if we see any sort of discrete cells fire off in this environment, all hazards of severe weather would be possible. And by the way, this is right around 8 o'clock or so, so notice how the greatest coverage in this scenario would be northern Illinois and southern and central Wisconsin, and then eventually these move into the Great Lakes around midnight, where most of these storms will just fall apart. So what do I think will happen? Well, I think we're going to still see pretty much what the HRRR model is showing, which is a line of thunderstorms that'll form and move across Minnesota and Wisconsin, I still have confidence that we are going to see at least 1 or 2 discrete cells fire off in this environment. And that, if that happens, we're probably going to see at least 1 strong or even long track tornado. So definitely make sure that you're staying weather aware and having multiple ways to receive alerts, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel, as we'll be live covering this as long as there's significant severe weather happening. But I do want to mention that the good news is that this is not expected to be a widespread severe weather event where we have a ton of different discrete supercells everywhere and a huge line of thunderstorms as well. This is kind of a mix, and it's kind of a hybrid where we're not going to be talking about widespread severe weather really in any given location, aside from maybe southeastern Minnesota, northeast Iowa, and also western Wisconsin, where that line of storms could produce all hazards of severe weather. Now, as we go into Tuesday, our threat of severe weather will be shifting to the south and east. Significant tornado parameter values will not be nearly as high on Tuesday, but we still will have a favorable environment here for at least a couple, if not a few, tornadoes across parts of the northeast. And notice how we even have some values around 1 to 2 back over in Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, and as well as Illinois. I honestly wouldn't rule out an isolated tornado during the late morning or early afternoon in those areas, so definitely stay weather aware. I still do think our tornado threat could expand a little bit here as we go into Tuesday. This back over in the southern plains, our threat of tornadoes will be mostly during the mid to late afternoon and early evening. I think a couple of tornadoes will be possible, especially back over in central and southern Oklahoma, but even back over into North Texas and perhaps as far north as southwestern Missouri, we could see an isolated tornado or two, so definitely make sure that you're staying weather aware. So here's the timing for severe weather, beginning with the northeast. As we go into Tuesday afternoon, storms will be ongoing. A line of thunderstorms is likely across parts of New York, and then another round of storms will occur during the early to mid-afternoon hours across Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York, where damaging winds will be the dominant threat, but there will be a potential for a couple of tornadoes. Most of us will see storms here in the northeast and also back into the Ohio Valley on Tuesday, so don't be surprised by seeing storms, but not everybody is going to see severe weather in this environment. But at least scattered to numerous damaging winds, some large hail, and a few tornadoes will be a possibility. Back over in the Ohio Valley, we should at least wake up to some storm activity back over near St. Louis, as long as storms do fire off over in Kansas and Oklahoma. As we go into the late morning and early afternoon, storms will continue across Indiana, back into Missouri, where some large hailstorms will also be a possibility back over in Missouri as we go into the afternoon. Bunch of damaging wind potential back over in Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky, where a line of storms will likely be ongoing. And then eventually by the very late afternoon and early evening, these storms will continue across the Tennessee Valley before eventually starting to weaken out as we go into the late evening and overnight hours. So most of anything that happens east of Missouri on Tuesday will be mostly during the daytime hours. There will be very little that happens after sunset. On the other hand, if you're back over in the southern plains, it'll be a very different story, as storms will be ongoing during the mid to late afternoon across Oklahoma back into Texas, and this will continue even into the evening hours. We could even see a line or a cluster of storms fire off anywhere from around Abilene back over towards Tulsa, and even a few storms into southern Missouri, where damaging winds, large hail, and a few tornadoes will all be in play. And this should continue into Wednesday, where there will be another risk of severe storms back over in North Texas and even back over in Oklahoma, where additional damaging winds, hail, and a few tornadoes are going to be a possibility. So again, a very active stretch of weather is ahead here just over the next 72 hours, and it will continue even as we go into late Wednesday and Thursday, where a trough will move from the southern plains into the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, where there will be an additional potential for at least some scattered or even isolated severe weather anywhere from the Ohio Valley back into the Dixie Alley, where damaging winds, hail, and a couple of tornadoes are going to be a possibility. Some of the good news that I do have for you is that by Friday into Saturday, we are going to have a large high pressure system building, so nicer weather is ahead. I honestly cannot wait for this to happen so we can get a little break from our severe weather. Unfortunately, though, I do think our risk of severe weather will make a return as we go into the early portion of next week back over in the central and southern plains. So definitely be weather aware. Make sure that you have multiple ways to receive alerts. And once again, we are going to be live on this channel later today, probably tomorrow and Wednesday as well, covering severe weather. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel and click the bell icon down below so you're notified with the latest updates.